I knew something was wrong the moment I lifted the lid of the mahogany box. It was the only thing in the house Jonathan ever told me not to touch. I used to laugh at the secrecy of it, assuming it held old love letters or embarrassing mementos he didn't want anyone to see. But the moment the box opened, a shudder rolled through me. His scent, cedar, leather, and the faint trace of the cologne he wore on special occasions, rose like a phantom touching the edges of my grief. Inside, wrapped in linen that had yellowed with age, was a stack of folders. On top lay a white envelope. My name was written in his handwriting across the front. For Eleanor. In case they come for you. They. That word alone sucked the air from my lungs. My fingers trembled, barely able to break the seal. And even before I unfolded the note inside, I felt it in my bones. Jonathan had kept secrets. Big ones. But the note was short. Only 6 words. They will betray you to survive. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I clutched the envelope as if it were the last piece of him I had left. A cold, nauseating suspicion crawled into my stomach, because hours earlier his friends, his so-called loyal circle, had sat at my dining table with smiles that looked like knives. They had invited themselves over 3 months after the funeral. They called it a supportive dinner. A way to help me understand what came next. As though widowhood was some administrative inconvenience. As though grief was a task they had arrived to supervise. When they walked into the house that night, something in me tightened. Martin was first, wearing a suit he thought made him look younger. He kissed my cheek with oily warmth. Andrew followed, lean, restless, sharp-eyed. Peter strutted in behind him with his usual overconfidence. Shaw entered last, already scanning the room for wine. We barely made it to the table before the patronizing began. "You're doing well, Eleanor," Martin said, swirling his drink. "But business, well, that was never your area." He said business like the word itself could bruise me. Andrew added, "Don't worry. We'll take care of everything. You just sign when we need you to. Just sign." 2 words that pressed against my ribs like a fist. I kept my face serene the way grief had trained me to, but my pulse hammered in my ears. What would I be signing? I asked. They exchanged glances. Shaw cleared his throat. "Nothing yet. But soon. There are decisions." Peter leaned forward, hands clasped like a benevolent mentor. "Jonathan left a lot unfinished. You wouldn't understand the details." I smiled at him, soft and patient. A smile men like them mistake for naivete. "Jonathan was very organized," I said lightly. "Strange that he left so much undone." For a flicker, just a blink, they froze. But arrogance is a comforting blanket for men who've worn it too long. They recovered quickly, eating, drinking, laughing, pretending nothing was amiss. But something was. And I could feel Jonathan's absence like an alarm. After they left that night, their cologne and condescension still clinging to the air, I sat in the dim dining room alone. The candles flickered restlessly. The house felt watchful. Hollow. Heavy. That was when I remembered the box. I pulled the floorboard loose with shaking hands, carried the mahogany box to the bed, opened it, and found the documents that changed everything. They weren't sentimental mementos. They were transfers, contracts, ownership papers, all stamped, notarized, and legally binding. And every single one of them named me as the new owner, majority shareholder of their companies. Jonathan had planned this months before his death. Not for sentiment, but for strategy. He didn't trust them, not anymore. By the time dawn spilled pale light across my bedroom floor, I understood something I had missed for years. Jonathan hadn't spent his final months preparing for death. He had spent them preparing for betrayal. The next morning, I wrote 4 invitations by hand. A dinner at my home on Friday at 8. Formal attire. No explanations. When Friday arrived, I dressed slowly in a black silk dress Jonathan once said made me look dangerous. The word no longer felt like a compliment. Felt like a prophecy. The doorbell rang. I walked slowly down the stairs, listening to the hollow echo of the house. One by one they entered again. Martin with his politician's smile. Andrew with his shifting eyes. Peter reeking of expensive cologne and entitlement. Shaw pretending not to be nervous. "You didn't tell us the occasion," Martin said. "But I did," I replied. "It's a dinner party." They chuckled, thinking grief had made me dramatic. But the table was set differently this time. Only 5 chairs. One at the head, Jonathan's old seat, now mine. Please, I said. Sit. They did. Predators always get comfortable when they believe their prey has stopped running. They poured wine, whispered among themselves, smiled wide, easy smiles. Then I placed the leather folder from the mahogany box on the table. The moment they saw the documents inside, the room turned to ice. Their laughter died in their throats. The color drained from their faces. Shaw's hand shook so violently his wine sloshed over the rim. What is this? Martin whispered. Jonathan left everything to me, I said calmly. Shares, voting rights, ownership, all of it. Every company you run, every company you think you control belongs to me now. That's not possible, Andrew snapped, but his voice cracked. Oh, it's very possible. And legally perfect. Peter stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. I pushed the documents toward them. Pages of signatures, legal seals, dates, proof. Tonight, I said softly, you're going to tell me what you did to him. They stared at me with 4 different shades of fear. But I wasn't done. Because there was more. Something I hadn't told them. Something far worse than ownership transfers. Upstairs, tucked inside the mahogany box beneath the documents, I had found something Jonathan never meant for me to discover. Something that would turn their fear into confessions. Something that would change everything again. I folded my hands on the table and waited. Start talking. They didn't speak at first. For men who had controlled empires, bullied boardrooms, and carved their way through every deal with sharp smiles suddenly looked small, cornered, exposed. The silence around us wasn't empty. It pulsed. It breathed. It felt like Jonathan himself was standing behind me watching. Martin was the first to break. Eleanor, he began carefully, as if my name were a detonator. There are things you don't understand. I understand everything. I cut in. Jonathan trusted you. And you betrayed him. I want to know how. His jaw tightened. His eyes darted to the others. They weren't united the way they used to be. Not without Jonathan to keep them in line. Fear has a way of making allies look like liabilities. It wasn't betrayal, Andrew said suddenly. His voice was high-strained. It was business. Jonathan made choices we didn't agree with. Choices like what? I asked. Shaw let out a shaky breath. He wanted to pull out of the offshore accounts. Wanted everything transparent, public, traceable. He swallowed. It would have killed us. So Jonathan had tried to cut them off, to separate himself from whatever they had built together. And they retaliated. What did you do to him? My voice didn't rise, but something inside it sharpened. Peter pressed his palms into the table. We didn't hurt him. That's what you're imagining. Jonathan was stubborn. Impossible to reason with in the end. In the end, I repeated softly. Martin looked at me then, truly looked. At the steadiness in my shoulders, the calm in my voice, the lack of tears. They had expected a broken widow. A fragile relic. A woman who would crack under the weight of legal jargon and emotional manipulation. Instead they found me. A woman holding the truth like a blade. He was becoming a problem, Martin said finally. For all of us. We planned to vote him out. Quietly. Legally. It was going to be clean. And then he died. I didn't ask a question. I made a statement. Their eyes flickered. Not guilt, fear. You think we had something to do with that? Peter scoffed, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. His heart gave out. The doctors said. I know what the doctors said. I leaned forward. But Jonathan didn't trust you. And he prepared for something. Something big enough to hide from me. And you 4 walk into my home acting like you expect me to hand you everything back. They said nothing. Cowards always go quiet when someone finally speaks the truth aloud. I reached into the leather folder again. Slowly, deliberately. Their faces tightened as though they expected me to pull out a weapon. In a way I did. A single envelope. Different from the others. Not addressed to me. Addressed to Jonathan himself. His name written in someone else's handwriting. Shaky, rushed like a man writing in fear. When I was reading through the documents, I said, I found something Jonathan hid beneath them. Something he must have taken from one of you. The room froze. I placed the envelope on the table. Recognize it? Shaw went pale. His lips parted but no sound came out. Martin whispered. Where did you get that? From the only place Jonathan hid the truth, I said. The box he protected more fiercely than anything else. Peter took a half step back. Eleanor, you don't know what's in that. No, I said calmly. But one of you does. I opened the envelope. Slowly. Inside was a letter, handwritten, frantic. The paper creased from being folded too quickly. The ink smudged in places as though from a trembling hand. I unfolded it gently, feeling every breath in the room tighten. Jonathan, please. We can't cover this much longer. If even one audit happens, we never meant for it to go this far. They'll blame you. You know they will. You're the only one they can pin it on. Please destroy the records. Before it destroys all of us. Shaw. His head dropped into his hands. A tremor ran through his shoulders. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he whispered. Jonathan found out everything. The offshore laundering. The shell companies. Martin's accounts. Peter's transfers. Andrew's signatures. He knew it all. And he tried to walk away, I said. Shaw nodded. And you couldn't let him. Martin stood abruptly, his voice cracking. Do not twist this, Eleanor. Jonathan made his choices. We made ours. It wasn't betrayal. It was survival. I felt something inside me break. Not with pain but with clarity. The man I had loved had spent his last months surrounded by snakes, pretending to trust men who were sharpening knives behind his back, trying to shield me from the fallout they had created. And these same men walked into my home acting like teachers correcting a foolish child. You thought he was going to expose you, I said quietly. So you isolated him, pushed him out, stressed him until his heart gave out. And now you want the companies back so you can bury the evidence he left behind. Andrew slammed his hand on the table. You have no idea what you're doing. Oh, but I do, I said softly. I reached under the table and lifted a small black device. A recorder. Light blinking red. Every confession. Every admission. Every word they had given me freely. The blood drained from their faces. Eleanor, Martin whispered. Listen. We can fix this. We can make you wealthy, powerful, protected. Just hand us the documents. Give us the recorder. No one needs to know what was said here tonight. I stood. And in my voice they finally heard Jonathan. No, I said. It ends with me. Their eyes widened. All four of them spoke at once. Pleading, bargaining, threatening. But I didn't hear their words anymore. I was listening to Jonathan's heartbeat echo inside mine. The heartbeat they had pushed to its final rhythm. I'll be contacting the authorities in the morning, I said calmly. Along with the board members. And the media. All of it. Eleanor. Get out. They hesitated. Now. One by one they left. Their footsteps trembled across the hardwood floors. Their shadows flickered against the walls. Their cologne, once masking their rot, hung in the air like dying deceit. When the door shut, the house fell silent. The weight of everything Jonathan had carried alone settled into my chest. The love. The fear. The impossible burden of dying with truths too dangerous to speak. I walked back to the mahogany box and placed the recorder inside. Then I whispered into the quiet room. I'm here now. I'll finish what you started. A soft breeze moved through the house, as if someone exhaled. I knew it was just the air. Just physics. Just the draft from the old window frame. But for the first time since Jonathan died, I didn't feel alone. And when I turned off the lights and walked upstairs, I felt something like peace blooming in the shadows. Not because justice had been served, but because its first ember had been lit. And I was the one who would carry it to flame.